warrant to search this property. Step aside.
Okay, then show me the warrant.
We don't have to show you anything. We're executing a lawful search.
Actually, under the Fourth Amendment, you're required to present the warrant before entry.
Lady, you're interfering with a police investigation. That's a crime.
And conducting a warrantless search is a constitutional violation. That's a law.
We have a warrant to search this property. Step aside. Okay, the woman replied calmly, still standing behind the door chain. Then show me the warrant. The lead officer didn't even blink. We don't have to show you anything. We're executing a lawful search. Her voice stayed steady, almost clinical. Actually, under the Fourth Amendment, you're required to present the warrant before entry. The officer's tone hardened. Lady, you're interfering with a police investigation. That's a crime. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't flinch. And conducting a warrantless search is a constitutional violation, she said. That's a law. At exactly 7:15 a.m. on a Saturday morning in Philadelphia, 3 narcotics officers thought they were about to execute a routine drug raid. What they didn't know was that they had just knocked on the door of someone who had helped send 14 corrupt cops to federal prison in the last 3 years. And the woman standing in that doorway wasn't going to be intimidated by badges or threats. She understood power better than they did. She knew the law better than their entire unit. And in the next 23 minutes, she was about to dismantle everything they thought they knew about getting away with illegal searches. Before we continue, where are you watching from right now? Drop your country or state in the comments. And if you haven't subscribed yet, hit that button now because this story gets absolutely wild. Her name was Jasmine Carter, 29 years old, black, calm, barefoot in sweatpants and a t-shirt, hair still wet from a shower, and not remotely who these officers thought they were dealing with. Because Jasmine wasn't a random resident, she wasn't a scared tenant, she wasn't someone who would panic at the word warrant. Jasmine Carter was one of the most feared federal prosecutors in the Eastern District of Pennsylvania. Not feared by criminals on the street, feared by criminals with badges. Jasmine's story didn't start in a courtroom. It started in the passenger seat of her father's car, watching him get pulled over again and again and again, for reasons that never sounded like reasons. Driving while black, existing while black, looking suspicious while black. And Jasmine made a decision early in life. If the system could be used as a weapon, she would learn how to use it as a shield and then as a hammer. She graduated from Stanford Law with honors, clerked for a federal appellate judge who specialized in criminal procedure, the kind of judge who could spot a Fourth Amendment violation from one paragraph. And then she did something most ambitious young lawyers would never do. She turned down the big-money law firms, turned down the corporate track, and took a job at the U.S. Attorney's Office for a fraction of the salary. Why? Because Jasmine didn't want to defend companies. She wanted to prosecute abuse. Specifically, abuse committed by people who thought their badge made them untouchable. She joined the Public Corruption Unit, the division that goes after government officials who violate civil rights, plant evidence, fabricate reports, and lie under oath, the cases other prosecutors avoided. Jasmine volunteered for them. Illegal searches, warrant fraud, excessive force, false testimony, and her results were brutal. An 87% conviction rate in public corruption cases, almost unheard of. Over 200 years of combined sentences secured. Police unions hated her. Defense attorneys feared her. Internal affairs departments treated her name like an alarm bell. Because when Jasmine Carter opened a file, people didn't get retrained. They got indicted. But what made her truly dangerous wasn't just that she knew criminal law. It was that she understood police procedure better than most cops. She'd spent hundreds of hours doing ride-alongs, watching tactics, learning how corners get cut. She'd reviewed thousands of body cam videos, reports, warrant applications, and she specialized in one particular pattern: illegal searches justified by false, exaggerated, or non-existent warrants. Officers who wanted fast arrests without probable cause would do one of two things: fabricate confidential informants that didn't exist, or claim exigent circumstances that never happened. And Jasmine had prosecuted 11 warrant fraud cases in 2 years. Her conviction rate on those? 100%. That's why what happened at 7:15 that Saturday morning mattered, because those 3 officers had walked right into the one person in Philadelphia who could recognize warrant fraud instantly, then enforce consequences. Jasmine lived in a converted warehouse in a transitioning neighborhood. Industrial 20 years ago, now filling up with artists, small businesses, young professionals. 2 units. Jasmine had the upstairs loft. The downstairs unit belonged to a tenant named James Torres. Quiet, paid rent on time, kept to himself. Puerto Rican, early 30s, normal guy. Jasmine didn't know him well, just neighbor-level stuff, hellos in the hallway, signing for packages. Once he helped carry groceries upstairs. What Jasmine didn't know was that James had a brother named Carlos. And Carlos was on the radar of Philadelphia PD's narcotics unit. Carlos wasn't a roommate. He didn't live there, but he visited, and narcotics officers, watching Carlos, saw him enter the warehouse one day. 20 minutes later, he walked out carrying a gym bag. That was it. One visit, one bag, no controlled buys, no confirmed stash, no evidence of drugs inside that building. But in their minds, that was enough to treat the address like a target. And instead of doing the hard work, surveillance, verification, probable cause, they did what they'd done before. They wrote a warrant application filled with assumptions dressed up as facts. Sudprinton, reliable confidential informant, that didn't exist. Multiple suspicious visits, when they'd seen one. Corroboration of drug activity, that wasn't real. They submitted it late Friday afternoon, exactly when judges are buried in paperwork and rushing into the weekend. A magistrate signed it, and the warrant covered the entire building, both units, which made it even worse, because they didn't even know which unit they wanted. They just wanted in. The team was 3 officers. Derek Mullins, 42, 15 years on the force, lead officer. Chris Santos and Rebecca Walsh, younger, less experienced, following Derek's lead. And Derek had history. 2 prior internal complaints for questionable search tactics, both cleared. Not because he was clean, because nobody dug deep enough. At 7:15 a.m., they pounded on the main door. Jasmine was already awake. She'd been out for a run, showered, coffee brewing. She walked to the door, chain still on, and looked through the glass. 3 figures in tactical gear. Police printed across their vests. She cracked the door. Derek saw a young black woman in casual clothes and made the first assumption he'd regret all day, that she'd be scared, that she'd be confused, that she'd step aside. "Police," Derek said. "We have a warrant to search this property. Step aside." Jasmine didn't argue. She didn't plead. She went straight to the point. "Show me the warrant." Derek tried the authority move. "We don't have to show you anything. We're executing a lawful search." And that right there was the lie. Because yes, warrants exist, but the Constitution doesn't work on trust me. Jasmine answered like she was teaching a class. Under the 4th Amendment, you're required to present the warrant before entry. Derek's jaw tightened. "Lady, you're interfering. That's a crime." Jasmine didn't back down. "And entering without presenting a valid warrant is a constitutional violation," she said. "That's a law." Derek's tone got sharper, because intimidation only works when the other person doubts themselves. And Jasmine didn't doubt anything. Then Derek made his fatal mistake. Instead of producing the warrant immediately, he tried to challenge her authority. Like, who did she think she was? Jasmine answered him cleanly. My name is Jasmine Carter, she said. Assistant United States Attorney, Public Corruption. The hallway went silent. She continued, voice steady. If you enter without showing a valid warrant, I will have federal charges filed by Monday morning. Not a threat, a promise. That's the moment Chris and Rebecca looked at Derek differently. Because now, this wasn't a citizen. This was someone with institutional power. Someone who could call the FBI Public Corruption Task Force and have it taken seriously. Someone whose Monday morning was spent in federal court. Derek froze for half a second, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded document. He held it up like that should end the conversation. Jasmine shook her head. Slide it under the door, she said, so I can read it. Derek hesitated, then complied. And that was the beginning of the end. Jasmine picked up the warrant and read it. Not skimmed. Read every line. Dates, claims, probable cause, alleged buys, alleged informant tips. 2 minutes passed. The officers waited in the hallway like they were watching a bomb tick down. Then Jasmine looked up, and her expression changed. Because she wasn't just seeing a bad warrant, she was seeing evidence of a crime. She opened the door fully, stepped into the hallway holding the warrant like an exhibit, and started asking questions. Slow, deliberate, impossible to bluff. Who is the confidential informant referenced here? She asked. Derek stiffened. I can't reveal that. Jasmine nodded. That's fine. I'll subpoena the identity in federal court. And when no CI exists, we'll both understand what that means. Derek swallowed. Jasmine kept going. These alleged controlled buys. What dates? What times? What quantities? Derek tried to deflect. That's in the case file. Great, Jasmine said. Give me the case number. I'll review it. He gave her a number. Then Jasmine asked the question that exposed the entire operation. Which unit are you actually searching? Both, Derek said quickly. Why both? Jasmine asked. When you have no specific information about either unit? Derek tried to hide behind the paper. The warrant covers the whole building. Jasmine's voice sharpened, not in anger but in clarity. A warrant must be particular, she said. Searching an entire building based on vague suspicion is a general warrant. General warrants are prohibited under the Fourth Amendment. Now Derek was sweating, not from heat, from pressure. Then Jasmine glanced at the signature. Judge Patricia Morrison signed this? Derek checked. Yes. Jasmine smiled. Not a happy smile. A consequences smile. I know Judge Morrison personally, she said. She would not sign off on something this sloppy, unless someone misrepresented facts to her. And then Jasmine asked the question that ended any chance Derek had of walking away clean. Who obtained this warrant? Derek's mouth tightened. I did. Jasmine tilted her head slightly. Derek Mullins, she said. Same Derek Mullins who's been investigated twice for questionable warrant tactics? Chris and Rebecca went still. The silence in the hallway felt heavy enough to press on your chest. Jasmine stepped closer, still calm, but now it sounded like sentencing. You have two choices, she said. Walk away right now and there will be an investigation, or execute this defective warrant, and I will personally ensure federal charges are filed under deprivation, rights under color of law. She paused. Maximum 10 years. Choose carefully, she said. Choose quickly. Chris and Rebecca looked at Derek. Derek looked at the warrant in Jasmine's hands. Then at the door behind her. And he finally did the smartest thing he'd done all morning. He told his team they were leaving. As they backed away, Derek reached for the paper. We need that, he argued. Jasmine didn't hand it back. No, she said. I'm keeping the original as evidence of a potential federal crime. Derek tried to push again. Jasmine didn't move. Have your sergeant contact my office, she said, if you have questions. The three officers left. Jasmine closed the door, went back inside, and started making calls. First, her supervisor at the U.S. Attorney's Office, then the FBI Public Corruption Task Force, then Internal Affairs at Philadelphia. PD. By 8:00 a.m., 3 investigations were opened. By Monday, Derek was placed on administrative leave. Then the deeper review started. His warrant applications for the last 2 years were pulled, and the pattern appeared fast, because patterns always appear when somebody finally looks. By Wednesday, federal agents interviewed Judge Morrison. She was furious when she learned what had been represented to her versus what was actually in the application. By Friday, Derek Mullins was arrested. Federal charges: deprivation of rights under color of law, perjury in a warrant application, each count carrying potential prison time. Chris and Rebecca weren't criminally charged, but both were suspended. They resigned before the investigation finished. And the investigation didn't stop with Derek. Agents started pulling narcotics unit warrants from the last 3 years. They found 27 with similar defects, 27 searches that might have been unconstitutional, 27 cases potentially poisoned. Jasmine recused herself as a witness because she was directly involved in the incident. But she didn't need to be on the stand to do damage. She was assigned to prosecute the broader pattern uncovered by the investigation. Over 9 months, her team interviewed dozens of residents whose homes were searched, reviewed hundreds of applications, identified additional officers involved, traced approvals back to supervisors. The unit supervisor, Lieutenant Thomas Brennan, was charged too, accused of approving problematic warrants without proper review. Derek went to trial. He claimed good faith, that he believed he had probable cause, that any errors were mistakes. Jasmine dismantled that defense methodically. She showed the jury warrant applications with nearly identical, confidential informant language, describing different informants who didn't exist. She showed how the warrants were submitted Friday afternoons. She showed patterns of targets, predominantly Black and Latino neighborhoods. She brought in witnesses who testified officers entered their homes, found nothing, and left without apology. The trial lasted 3 weeks. The jury deliberated 6 hours, guilty on all counts. Derek Mullins was sentenced to 8 years in federal prison, and when the story broke publicly, it detonated. The U.S. Attorney held a press conference, mentioned the case began because a prosecutor personally witnessed an illegal search attempt. Reporters identified Jasmine. Within 24 hours, she received death threats, many explicitly racist. She also received hundreds of emails from families thanking her, people who had lived through the same thing but never had the system listen. More officers were charged. 8 were fired. Lieutenant Brennan pleaded guilty and got 5 years. The narcotics unit was disbanded. The department was forced into reforms. Legal review of warrant applications. Mandatory Fourth Amendment training. Body cams required for warrant executions. Outside auditing of warrant patterns, and then the civil suits came. The city dismissed charges in 19 of the affected cases. 5 people were released from prison when convictions were overturned. Settlements totaled over $18 million, all because Jasmine Carter refused to step aside at her own door. This story isn't just about one prosecutor shutting down one bad raid. It's about what happens when police meet someone who, 1, knows the law, 2, recognizes the tactics, and 3, has the power to enforce accountability. Because a lot of officers count on one thing. Most people don't know what they're allowed to ask. They don't know they can read a warrant. They don't know what particularity means. They don't know what red flags look like. And if they do know, they don't always believe it matters. Jasmine proved it matters. She proved that knowledge plus composure can stop an abuse of power in real time. And she proved that systems only change when someone follows through. Calls get made, Paperwork gets filed. Evidence gets preserved. Cases get prosecuted. One door. One defective warrant. 23 minutes. And an entire unit collapsed. Final question for you. What's one thing you learned from this story that you didn't know before? Drop it in the comments and make sure you subscribe, because the next story is even crazier.